If I just had one sentence to convince you how good this movie is, I'd tell you.
It's just full of the exaggerated swagger of a green teen.
Our lovable, overgrown animals from NYC are back on the big screen, baby! With this 2023 release of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. And I gotta be honest with you, they are close to looking better than ever. This jam-packed, star-studded film manages to make the most out of its barely 1 hour and 30-minute runtime, dazzling critics and audiences alike with its visuals, and through a combination of technical brilliance and its jovial charm, has even sparked some conversations about being the best animated film of 2023. I mean, if you need any confirmation of if it's worth a watch, trust me, it's really good. Now yes, Mutant Mayhem is yet another reboot of our favorite four turtles. However, this time around, the creative team made it a point to specifically define this iteration based on embracing those teenage aspects. Not in a cartoonish, lacking real depth sort of way, but in a more human way. Like having those unfortunate voice cracks, struggling to talk to girls, wanting to be accepted by your peers, and the general naivety everyone has at that age when approaching situations. I mean, their first fight was less like a group of well-trained soldiers and more like four kids stumbling around. Yet as the fight progressed, they kept learning their limits, developing experiences, and building that confidence amongst themselves. A very human approach that happens plenty throughout that age and even beyond it. It was just an extremely refreshing take, considering that this part of TMNT has been a constantly neglected aspect of these characters. In all fairness though, it is the hardest to portray, considering that they look like mutant turtles and they do ninja things, but capturing how weird puberty can be, it's a lot harder. This has led to past iterations seemingly forgetting that detail, except when including catchphrases that haven't been seen as a young person thing since the 80s. This more juvenile approach has led to these characters feeling a lot more whole, in a way that's different from most iterations. And it has allowed for a more interesting take on their typical character archetypes, which I really enjoyed. Like their primary reason for originally becoming heroes was to save the city, more specifically prom, so that they can be accepted for their mutations and eventually end up being able to go to high school. Thus ending in a pretty well done lesson in the importance of intentions and how one can be led astray if their heart isn't in the right place. You also have Leo's evolution as a leader being interestingly shaped within the context of a corny kid who comes around to value the well-being of his brothers over blindly following other people's interests. These aren't groundbreaking themes, admittedly, but it's the way that they are framing these beloved characters in different yet fitting lighting that makes their journey all that more enticing. And that constant effort to redefine and bring focus to who the turtles actually are is felt throughout the entire project. It really feels like a proper Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles story that can be like a prequel to other series, which are more like young adult Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, I can't just sit here and give all the praise to the Turtles' characterizations because that would be disingenuous, considering that the real MVP of this movie was that voice acting. For such a star-riddled cast, not once did I feel like I was watching a celebrity just voicing a character, but they all actually sounded like people who threw themselves into the role. The four turtles and their young but talented VAs of course fit the aesthetic of the movie, but then you also had people such as Jackie Chan killing his role as a protective father. I even like how Spencer got a chance to use props in his surroundings for his main fight, which is in the style that Chan's live-action fight scenes are typically famous for. Rogan and Cena were great in their limited lines. I didn't even know names such as Paul Rudd, Hannibal Buress, Post Malone, and Maya Rudolph were in this movie, which shows how committed and into it they were. In fact, my only real gripe about the voice acting is that we don't hear enough from these mutants. However, with the sequel most likely in the works, I'm not all that upset about it. Ice Cube had the most lines of any villain there, and while we could immediately point out his voice from a mile away, to tell you the truth, this may have been a top 10 performance of his career, and I'm not even joking. He absolutely bodied the role of Superfly, with Bro's charisma stats being all the way maxed out, allowing him to come off as empathetic and enjoyable while maintaining that intimidation, and his comedic timing and delivery were honestly second to none. Many of these people are VAs, but they seemingly had a lot of fun on this project, and it shows by how well their interpretations come to life with such fluidity and vibrance on that big screen. Now, for a project with that many highs, they were bound to have some perceived negatives, and the biggest point of contention for this project, which is surprisingly turning a lot of people off from it, is surrounding the film's dialogue and more so, the comedy. Notably that the turtles are cringy at times, who make too many references that will be outdated in a couple of years, and that they aren't our turtles. Look, I have my own critiques. Trust me, I'll get to that later. But I feel like this is a case of being blinded by pure nostalgia to the point that you aren't even opening up to a newer interpretation and therefore grossly undervaluing the newer film. Because a lot of the criticisms that are along the lines of what I mentioned before can easily be disproven and is summed up in them not wanting the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to be, well, teenage. Like Like, as far as the dialogue, do you guys know how a 15-year-old boy talks? Because if you say it isn't along the lines of how the turtles are portrayed, I think you may be in the minority there. Because ain't no way you guys were talking with such elegance since freshman year in high school. They were silly and a bit cringy, but that's the point of a younger and more juvenile turtles. That's the point of making this entire separate interpretation, as we can see them actually evolve in these developmental years, which opens up a whole new world of storytelling potential. And as far as the references, this has simply been blown way out of proportion, especially since not only are many of the references going to last a while, considering that they talk about things such as Beyonce, Drake, and anime, but it's the fact that these are teenagers, the largest proponent of pop and media culture. It actually makes more sense for them to give references than something like Deadpool or shows notorious for it like Family Guy. The comedy and dialogue is actually the last thing I thought I would be defending, considering that I thought it would be the biggest problem based on them hanging on to that ooze joke in the trailer, but I was surely surprised when the dragged on jokes rarely if ever happened in this movie. They actually took the route of more recurring jokes than anything else, and when they did hold on to a joke, it works well within the context of the scene, as sometimes they are holding over jokes based on nervousness when encountering something new, or the movie intentionally shows that they're supposed to be framed as these corny group of dudes who've only interacted with each other their entire lives. I genuinely scoured up and down different review sites trying to engage why anyone would put this below a 4 out of 10, just so I can add to my own personal knowledge and make this video more well-rounded. I can sort of understand putting it at like a 6 or a 7. I personally think it's a mid to low 8. It's just that a good bulk of these 1, 2, or 3 out of 10 ratings are just hurt older fans that are upset that they didn't get their young adult Mutant Ninja Turtles or straight 1-to-1 copy of an 80s cartoon that they haven't seen in ages. A lot of these criticisms are because it isn't exactly something else, even though that's the specific point of a separate interpretation. And unless it's greatly affecting the quality or the potential of the piece, a personal preference shouldn't be knocking a rating that low. Like, one criticism I personally have for this movie is that I didn't like how they cut out Splinter's past life as Hamato Yoshi. Not because that's how the originals did it, but because it makes the story more interesting when Shredder arrives having that connection. Plus, it legitimizes the Turtles training a lot more. I understand loving and cherishing a series, trust me, I really do, but immediately writing it off because it's not what you expected, it's kinda silly. As I mentioned before though, I'm not going to excuse this movie for everything, because they do slip up from time to time in ways that I'm interested to see how they will affect future projects. Like the big ending being a giant kaiju fight kinda conflicts with the more grounded, simpler establishing movie that the story was going for. I know they may have wanted something extremely big, so it makes more sense why the Turtles are accepted by the public by the end of the movie, but I feel as if the same effect could have happened if they would have just stopped Superfly's original plan, as it was pretty diabolical on a global scale, enough so that if it's known that the Turtles did it, they would have probably still been embraced in the end. But now you have future sequels that are already faced with escalation problems. Should have just made normal Superfly the villain in this, then you have that escalation in namesake alone as Shredder makes his appearance in the sequel, and then if you have to have it, leave the giant kaiju fight for a physical escalation in the 3rd installment. Despite my mild complaints, however, I can't personally put this release below an 8, because while simple, it's still very solid thematically, but those technical points of this movie just left me craving more. It's yet another time that I just give thanks to Sony for taking that risk on Into the Spider-Verse, because the blending of 2D and 3D has done wonders for every project that takes part of it, and Mutant Mayhem is no exception. I will admit I am a sucker for the highly stylized movies, and this really takes it one step beyond where its predecessors did as far as animation, fully embracing that roughness that companies like Walt Disney Animation often shy from. They did use a lot of licensed music, but they were implemented at the most optimal of points, along with a great balance of phenomenal original sounds, so I can't really take anything away from it. It just all came together in this giant spectacle that can best be described as Superfly. What's most funny about this movie's brilliance is that it felt like the ultimate back burner to literally everything else in the film world. It's not like we didn't see the trailers, as I felt like they were pretty fairly marketed, especially with them being a pretty well-known IP already, but they were just chilling in the back as Barbenheimer took off to the moon. People say that Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning was the biggest loser from the double feature, but at least people are talking about how unpopular the movie was becoming. They don't even talk about the stunts of Mutant Mayhem type at all. But as 2023 has already shown, when push comes to shove, quality always wins. If you want to hear more about a franchise that is debatably leading the animation game right now, go check out my Miles Morales analysis video. And if you want to hear about drama surrounding the animation that's objectively made the most money, go check out my Super Mario Bros video. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, and have a great day.